All right, good morning. Some of us might still be having some trouble logging on, but we are going to go ahead and get started today with class. Welcome to 6th grade English Language Arts. We have been reading The Giver together. It's an awesome book. Right now we are starting chapter 11. So most classes we've been trying to get through 2 chapters together. I think for today we're going to do our best just to get through 1, and we've got some discussion questions that we might start in class, and if not, they will be homework. We've got our usual, who are the characters? Who's in our story? We've got the setting that we want to make sure we know where the story is taking place in this chapter. Then we'll have our summary. So that's a couple of sentences to describe what happened in the chapter, what was the plot, and then finally we'll make some predictions. What do you think is going to happen next based on the events that have already happened and based about what we know about our characters? So without further ado, let's jump into The Giver. We are in chapter 11, and if you have one of the copies of our book, this is going to be on page 101. Jonas felt nothing unusual at first. He felt only the light touch of the old man's hand on his back. He tried to relax, to breathe evenly. The room was absolutely silent, and for a moment Jonas feared that he might disgrace himself now on the first day of his training by falling asleep. Then he shivered. He realized that the touch of his hands felt suddenly cold. At the same instant, breathing in, he felt the air change, and his very breath was cold. He licked his lips, and in doing so, his tongue touched the suddenly chilled air. It was startling, but he was not at all frightened now. He was filled with energy, and he breathed again, feeling the sharp intake of frigid air. Now, too, he could feel cold air swirling around his entire body. He felt it blow against his hands where they lay at his sides and over his back. The touch of the man's hands seemed to have disappeared. Now he became aware of an entirely new sensation. Pinpricks? No, because they were soft and without pain. Tiny, cold, feather-like feelings peppered his body and face. He put out his tongue again and caught one of the dots of cold upon it. It disappeared from his awareness instantly, but he caught another and another. The sensation made him smile. One part of his consciousness knew that he was still lying there on the bed in the annex room. Yet another, separate part of his being was upright now, in a sitting position, and beneath him he could feel that he was not on the soft decorated bed covering at all, but rather seated on a flat, hard surface. His hands now held, though at the same time they were still motionless at his sides, a rough, damp rope. And he could see, though his eyes were closed. He could see a bright, whirling torrent of crystals in the air around him, and he could see them gather on the backs of his hands like cold fur. His breath was visible. Beyond, through the swirl of what he now somehow perceived was the thing that old man had spoken of, snow, he could look out and down a great distance. He was up high someplace. The ground was thick with the fury snow, but he sat slightly above it on a hard, flat object. Sled, he knew abruptly. He was sitting on a thing called sled, and the sled itself seemed to be poised at the top of a long, extended mound that rose from the very land where he was. Even as he thought the word mound, his new consciousness told him hill. Then the sled, with Jonas himself upon it, began to move through the snowfall, and he understood instantly that now he was going downhill. No voice made an explanation. The experience explained itself to him. His face cut through the frigid air as he began the descent, moving through the substance called snow on the vehicle called sled, which propelled itself on what he now knew without doubt to be runners. Comprehending all of those things as he sped downwards, he was free to enjoy the breathless glee that overwhelmed him. The speed, the clear cold air, the total silence, the feeling of balance and excitement and peace. Then, as the angle of the incline lessened, as the mound, the hill, flattened, nearing the bottom, the sled's forward motion slowed. The snow was piled now around it, and he pushed with his body, moving it forward, not wanting the exhilarating ride to end. Finally, the obstruction of the piled snow was too much for the thin runners of the sled, and he came to a stop. He sat there for a moment, panting, holding the rope in his cold hands. Tentatively, he opened his eyes, not his snow-hill sled eyes, for they had been open throughout the strange ride. He opened his ordinary eyes and saw that he was still on the bed, that he had not moved at all. The old man, still beside the bed, was watching him. "How do you feel?" he asked. Jonas sat up and tried to answer honestly. "Surprised," he said after a moment. The old man wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Whew," he said. "It was exhausting. But you know, even transmitting that tiny memory to you, I think it lightened me just a bit." "Do you mean, did you say I could ask questions?" The man nodded, encouraging his question. "Do you mean that you don't have the memory of that ride on the sled anymore?" "That's right. A little weight off this old body." "But it was such fun, and now you don't have it anymore. I took it from you." But the old man laughed. "All I gave you was one ride, on one sled, in one snow, on one hill. I have a whole world of them in my memory. I could give them to you one by one 1,000 times, and there would still be more." "Are you saying that we could do it again?" Jonas asked. "I'd really like to. I think I could steer by pulling the rope. I didn't try this time because it was so new." The old man, laughing, shook his head. "Maybe another day, for a treat. But there's no time really just to play. I only wanted to begin by showing you how it works." "Now," he said, turning businesslike, "lie back down. I want to." Jonas did. He was eager for whatever experience would come next. But he had suddenly so many questions. "No, that's okay. There's actually no one who's waiting, and I don't have anyone in the class." "Yeah." "Why don't we have snow and sleds and hills?" he asked. "And when did we in the past? Did my parents have sleds when they were young? Did you?" And the old man shrugged and gave a short laugh. "No," he told Jonas. "It's a very distant memory. That's why it was so exhausting. I had to tug it forward from many generations back. It was given to me when I was a new receiver. And the previous receiver had to pull it through a long time period too. But what happened to those things? Snow and the rest of it? Climate control. Snow made growing food difficult, limited the agricultural periods, and unpredictable weather made transportation almost impossible at times. It wasn't a practical thing, so it became obsolete when we went to sameness. And hills too," he added. "They made conveyance of goods unwieldy. Trucks, buses, slowed them down, so..." He waved his hand as if a gesture had caused the hills to disappear. "Sameness," he concluded. Jonas frowned. "I wish we had those things still, just now and then." The old man smiled. "So do I," he said, "but that choice is not ours." "But sir," Jonas suggested, "since you have so much power..." The man corrected him. "Honor," he said firmly. "I have great honor. So will you. But you will find that it is not the same as power." "Lie quietly now. Since we've entered into the topic of climate, let me give you something else. And this time, I'm not going to tell you the name of it because I want to test the receiving. You should be able to perceive the name without being told. I gave away snow and sled and downhill and runners by telling them to you in advance." Without being instructed, Jonas closed his eyes again. He felt the hands on his back again. He waited. Now it came more quickly, the feelings. This time, the hands didn't become cold, but instead began to feel warm on his body. They moistened a little. The warmth spread, extending across his shoulders, up his neck, onto the side of his face. He could feel it through his clothes parts too, a pleasant all-over sensation, and when he licked his lips this time, the air was hot and heavy. He didn't move. There was no sled. His posture didn't change. He was simply alone someplace, out of doors, lying down, and the warmth came from far above. It was not as exciting as the ride through the snowy air, but it was pleasurable and comforting. Suddenly, he perceived the word for it: sunshine. He perceived that it came from the sky. Then it ended. Sunshine, he said aloud, opening his eyes. Good, you did get the word. That makes my job easier. Not so much explaining. And it came from the sky. That's right, the old man said, just the way it used to. Before climate control, Jonas added. The man laughed. You receive well and learn quickly. I'm very pleased with you. That's enough for today, I think. We are off to a good start. There was a question bothering Jonas. Sir, he said, the chief elder told me, she told everyone, and you told me too, that it would be painful. So I was a little scared. But it didn't hurt at all. I really enjoyed it. He looked quizzically at the old man. The man sighed. I started you with memories of pleasure. My previous failure gave me the wisdom to do that. He took a few deep breaths. Jonas, he said, it will be painful, but it need not be painful yet. I'm brave. I really am. Jonas sat up a little straighter. The old man looked at him for a moment. He smiled. I can see that, he said. Well, since you asked the question, I think I have enough energy for one more transmission. Lie down once more. This will be the last today. Jonas obeyed cheerfully. He closed his eyes, waiting, and felt the hands again. Then he felt the warmth again, the sunshine again, coming from the sky of this other consciousness that was so new to him. This time, as he lay basking in the wonderful warmth, he felt the passage of time. His real self was aware that it was only a minute or two, but his other, memory-receiving self felt hours pass in the sun. His skin began to sting. Restlessly, he moved one arm, bending it, and felt a sharp pain in the crease of his inner arm at the elbow. Ouch, he said loudly, and shifted on the bed. Ow, he said, wincing at the shift, and even moving his mouth to speak make his face hurt. He knew there was a word, but the pain kept him from grasping it. Then it ended. He opened his eyes, wincing in discomfort. It hurt, he told the man, and I couldn't get the word for it. It was sunburn, the old man told him. It hurt a lot, Jonas said, but I'm glad you gave it to me. It was interesting, and now I understand better what it meant that there would be pain. The man didn't respond. He sat silently for a second. Finally, he said, Get up now. It's time for you to go home. They both walked to the center of the room. Jonas put his tunic back on. Goodbye, sir, he said. Thank you for my first day. The old man nodded to him. He looked drained and a little sad. Sir, Jonas said shyly. Yes, do you have a question? It's just that I don't know your name. I thought you were the receiver, but now you say that I'm the receiver, so I don't know what to call you. The man had sat back down in the comfortable upholstered chair. He moved his shoulders around as if to ease away an aching sensation. He seemed terribly weary. Call me the giver, he told Jonas. All right, so we are going to pause for a minute right there on chapter 11, and I am going to show you all on our Google Classroom how we are going to respond to questions. So, I'm going to share with you this is our classwork page, you can see here. So for chapter 11, you can see we've already got uploaded here. This is where you will come to respond to the characters. So for you, it'll look a little different, but you're gonna come in here and answer the question, who are the characters in our chapter 11? This one is pretty simple, we only had a couple. The setting, where are we in chapter 11? The summary, what happened in that chapter? And finally, predictions for the future. And not necessarily just chapter 12, but beyond even the next chapter. What do you think is going to happen now that Jonas has met the giver? Now we know that's his name. And here's kind of our bonus question. So we'll always have the basic structure of the chapter, who we're dealing with, what they did, what we think is going to happen next. And then we'll have a bonus question or two. So here you can see, if you could share one If you could share one happy memory with Jonas, what would it be? Describe it. Why would you choose that memory? And you're going to answer in 5 to 7 sentences, so one solid paragraph. And there's no right or wrong answer, but I want to know if you had this cool ability, like the giver, to give Jonas a memory, why would you choose to give him that one? So the giver started with snow. He started with snow because, like he said, it was a fun memory. It was something that was going to make Jonas excited and smile. Then he did the less fun memory with the sunburn. So I want us to focus on the positive side right now. I want you to think, well, maybe I would share with him a memory from my birthday party, or maybe I would share with him a memory from Christmas morning when I got my puppy, whatever it is. And just for the sake of the exercise, we'll say that you get to keep the memory too. So don't worry about losing this memory yourself, but what would you want to share with Jonas? Remember, he lives in a world where everyone is sort of the same. He didn't know about snow. He doesn't have a pet. Maybe you would share with him when you picked out your kitten and what it's like to have a snuggly little animal. He doesn't know what it's like to drive a car. Maybe you can talk about when your brother or sister got their license and how exciting that was when you got to ride with them for the first time. Whatever it is, I want you to write about that memory and describe it so that if Jonas was there, what would he be seeing? What would he be smelling? Maybe you tell him about a meal you like to cook. Whatever it is, we want to use our sensory language to paint the picture for Jonas and then tell us why. Why would that memory in particular be so important to share with Jonas? So that is sort of how our lessons will go each day. You will answer the questions before next class. So today's Tuesday, so by Thursday, we should all go on there and start answering those questions. And since we've got some time, this is awesome. We're not going to fall behind in our reading schedule. I'm going to go ahead and read us chapter 12, and then you'll see on the same Google Classroom the questions. So we'll answer who, kind of where, what, and what we think is going to happen next, as well as an additional question to get us thinking a little more critically and a little more creatively. So I do have the code here. Everyone has access to Google. You just go on, search Google Classroom. You should find it pretty easily, but let me know if you have questions. And then our code is here. It's EDCUW7S. And that will get you to our special 6th grade ELA class. All right, let's jump into chapter 12. You slept soundly, Jonas? His mother asked at the morning meal. No dreams? Jonas simply smiled and nodded, not ready to lie, not willing to tell the truth. I slept very soundly, he said. I wish this one would, his father said, leaning down from his chair to touch Gabriel's waving fist. The basket was on the floor beside him. In its corner, beside Gabriel's head, the stuffed hippo sat staring with its blank eyes. So do I, Mother said, rolling her eyes. He's so fretful at night. Jonas had not heard the new child during the night because, as always, he had slept soundly. But it was not true that he had had no dreams. Again and again, as he slept, he had slid down that snow-covered hill. Always in the dream, it seemed as if there were a destination, a something, he could not grasp what, that lay beyond the place where the thickness of snow brought the sled to a stop. He was left upon wakening with the feeling that he wanted, even somehow needed, to reach the something that waited in the distance. The feeling that it was good, that it was welcoming, that it was significant, but he did not know how to get there. He tried to shed the leftover dream, gathering his schoolwork and preparing for the day. School seemed a little different today. The classes were the same: language and communications, commerce and industry, science and technology, civil procedures and government. But during the breaks for recreation periods and the midday meal, the other new 12s were abuzz with descriptions of their first day of training. All of them talked at once, interrupting each other, hastily making the required apology for interrupting, then forgetting again in the excitement of describing the new experiences. Jonas listened. He was very aware of his own admonition not to discuss his training, but it would have been impossible anyway. There was no way to describe to his friends what he had experienced there in the annex room. How could you describe a sled without describing a hill and snow? And how could you describe a hill and snow to someone who had never felt height or wind or that feathery magical cold? Even trained for years as they all had been in precision of language, what words could you use to give another the experience of sunshine? So it was easy for Jonas to be still and to listen. After school hours, he rode again beside Fiona to the house of the old. I looked for you yesterday, she told him, so we could ride home together. Your bike was still there, so I waited for a little while, but it was getting late, so I went on home. I apologize for making you wait, Jonas said. I accept your apology, she replied automatically. I stayed a little longer than I expected, Jonas explained. She pedaled forward silently, and he knew that she expected him to tell her why. She expected him to describe his first day of training. To ask would have fallen into the category of rudeness. You've been doing so many volunteer hours with the old, Jonas said, changing the subject. There won't be much that you don't already know. Oh, there's lots to learn, Fiona replied. There's administrative work, the dietary rules, and punishment for disobedience. Did you know that they use a discipline wand on the old, the same as for small children? And there's occupational therapy and recreational activities and medications, and they reach the building and braked their bikes. I really think I'll like it better than school, Fiona confessed. Me too, Jonas agreed, wheeling his bike into its place. She waited for a second, as if, again, she expected him to go on. Then she looked at her watch, waved, and hurried toward the entrance. Jonas stood for a moment beside his bike, startled. It had happened again. The thing he thought of as now seeing beyond. This time it had been Fiona, who had undergone that fleeting, indescribable change. As he looked up and toward her going through at the door, it happened. She changed. Actually, Jonas thought, trying to recreate it in his mind, it wasn't Fiona in her entirety. It seemed to be just her hair. And just for that flickering instant. He ran through it in his mind. It was clearly beginning to happen more often. First the apple a few weeks before. The next time had been in the faces in the auditorium just 2 days ago. Now, today, Fiona's hair. Frowning, Jonas walked toward the annex. I will ask the giver, he decided. The old man looked up, smiling, when Jonas entered the room. He was already seated beside the bed, and he seemed more energetic today, slightly renewed and glad to see Jonas. Welcome, he said. We must get started. You're 1 minute late. I apologize. Jonas began, then stopped, flustered, remembering there were to be no apologies. He removed his tunic and went to bed. I'm 1 minute late because something happened, he explained, and I'd like to ask you about it if you don't mind. You may ask me anything. Jonas tried to sort it out in his mind so that he could explain it clearly. I think it's what you call seeing beyond, he said. The giver nodded. Describe it, he said. Jonas told him about the experience with the apple, then the moment on the stage when he had looked out and seen the same phenomenon in the faces of the crowd. Then today, just now outside, it happened with my friend Fiona. She herself didn't change exactly, but something about her changed for a second. Her hair looked different, but not in its shape, not in its length. I can't quite. Jonas paused, frustrated by his inability to grasp and describe exactly what had occurred. Finally, he simply said, it changed. I don't know how or why. That's why I was 1 minute late, he concluded, and looked questioningly at the giver. To his surprise, the old man asked him a question which seemed unrelated to seeing beyond. When I gave you the memory yesterday, the first one, on the ride and sled, did you look around? Jonas nodded. Yes, he said, but the stuff, snow in the air, it made it hard to see anything. Did you look at the sled? Jonas thought back. No, I only felt it under me. I dreamed of it last night too, but I don't remember seeing the sled in my dream either, just feeling it. The giver seemed to be thinking, when I was observing you before this election, I perceived that you probably had the capacity, and what you described confirms that. It happened somewhat differently to me, the giver told him. When I was just your age, about to become the new receiver, I began to experience it. Though it took a different form, with me it was, well, I won't describe that now. You wouldn't understand it yet. But I think I can guess how it's happening with you. Let me just make a little test to confirm my guess. Lie down. Jonas lay on the bed again with his hands at his sides. He felt comfortable here now. He closed his eyes and waited for the familiar feel of the giver's hand on his back. But it didn't come. Instead, the giver instructed him, call back the memory of the ride on the sled, just the beginning of it, when you're at the top of the hill before the slide starts. And this time, look down at the sled. Jonas was puzzled. He opened his eyes. Excuse me, he asked politely, but don't you have to give me the memory? It's your memory now. It's not mine to experience any longer. I gave it away. But how can I call it back? You can remember last year or the year that you were a 7 or 5, can't you? Of course. It's much the same. Everyone in the community has one generation memories like those, but now you will be able to go back farther. Try. Just concentrate. Jonas closed his eyes again. He took a deep breath and sought the sled in the hill and the snow in his consciousness. There they were, with no effort. He was again sitting in that whirling world of snowflakes atop the hill. Jonas grinned with delight and blew his own steamy breath into view. Then, as he had been instructed, he looked down. He saw his own hands, furred with snow, holding the rope. He saw his legs and moved them aside for a glimpse of the sled beneath. Dumbfounded, he stared at it. This time it was not a fleeting impression. This time the sled had, and he continued to have as he blinked and stared at it again, that same mysterious quality that the apple had so briefly. And Fiona's hair. The sled did not change. It was simply whatever the thing was. Jonas opened his eyes and was still on the bed. The giver was watching him curiously. Yes, Jonas said slowly. I saw it in the sled. Let me try one more thing. Look over there to the bookcase. Do you see the very top row of books, the ones behind the table on the top shelf? Jonas sought them with his eyes. He stared at them, and they changed. But the change was fleeting. It slipped away the next instant. It happened, Jonas said. It happened to the books, but it went away again. I'm right then, the giver said. You're beginning to see the color red. The what? The giver sighed. How to explain this? Once, back in the time of memories, everything had a shape and size, the way things still do, but they also had a quality called color. There were a lots of colors, and one of them was called red. That's the one you are starting to see. Your friend Fiona has red hair. Quite distinctive, actually. I've noticed it before. When you mentioned Fiona's hair, it was the clue that told me you were probably beginning to see the color red. And the faces of people? The one I saw at the ceremony? The giver shook his head. No, flesh isn't red, but it has red tones in it. There was a time, actually you'll see this in the memories later, when flesh was many different colors. That was before we went to sameness. Today, flesh is all the same, and what you saw was the red tones. Probably when you saw the faces take on the color, it wasn't as deep or vibrant as the apple or your friend's hair. The giver chuckled suddenly. We've never completely mastered sameness. I suppose the genetic scientists are still hard at work trying to work the kinks out. Hair like Fiona's must drive them crazy. Jonas listened, trying hard to comprehend. And the sled, he said, it had that same thing, the red color. But it didn't change, Giver, it just was. Because it's a memory from the time when color was. It was so, I wish language were more precise. The red was so beautiful. The giver nodded. It is. Do you see it all the time? I see all of them. All the colors. Will I? Of course, when you receive the memories, you have the capacity to see beyond. You'll gain wisdom then, along with colors, and lots more. Jonas wasn't interested just then in wisdom. It was the colors that fascinated him. Why can't everyone see them? Why did colors disappear? The giver shrugged. Our people made that choice, the choice to go to sameness. Before my time, before the previous time, back and back and back. We relinquished color when we relinquished sunshine and did away with differences. He thought for a moment. We gained control of many things, but we had to let go of others. We shouldn't have, Jonas said fiercely. The giver looked startled at the certainty of Jonas's reaction. Then he smiled wryly. You've come very quickly to that conclusion, he said. It took me many years. Maybe your wisdom will come much more quickly than mine. He glanced at the wall clock. Lie back down now. We have so much to do. Giver, Jonas asked as he arranged himself again on the bed. How did it happen to you when you were becoming the receiver? You said that the scene beyond happened to you, but not in the same way. The hands came to his back. Another day, the giver said gently. I'll tell you another day. Now we must work. And I thought of a way to help you with the concept of color. Close your eyes and be still now. I'm going to give you a memory of a rainbow. All right, and that is where we will stop for today. So I would love for you to look back in your notes and look at your predictions and see, is what you predicted was kind of wrong with the apple color? So back when Jonas was kind of tossing the apple with his friend Asher, remember the apple changed somehow? And we were all thinking, how did it change? Did it become a different shape? Did it get bigger or smaller? Or maybe it became a different object for a second? We had a lot of different really creative ideas. So I'd love for you to go back into your notes and see, what did I predict way back in chapter 6 or whatever it was? What did I think happened to the apple? And see, did anyone predict that he saw color? Now, maybe not, because up until this point, we didn't realize that they were seeing everything in black and white. So now we have to go back and kind of erase all of the color from this world. What would it be like if everything was in black and white, like an old movie? If you've ever seen The Wizard of Oz, at the beginning of the movie when they're in Kansas, everything just black and white, kind of plain and kind of darker tones. And then when she steps out into Oz, color explodes. So that is kind of what's beginning to happen with Jonas. Although with Dorothy, when she steps out, it's an immediate change. Everything is color and she can see all the colors of the rainbow. But with Jonas, it starts a little more subtly. He sees a little bit of red here, a little bit of red there, until layer by layer, he's going to start seeing more and more colors. So for chapter 12, and don't worry, this is going to be on the Google Classroom. So again, please make sure you're logged on there and that you're answering the questions before the next class. I want you to think a couple of things. First, if you had to choose just one color that you could see, what color would it be? And then tell me why. It's always important when you're giving your opinion, back it up with some reasons, with some examples. Maybe you're a surfer, so you're like, yes, I have to see the color blue, because when I'm surfing, I could see the beautiful blue of the ocean and look up and see the beautiful blue of the sky. Maybe you're a soccer player, so you're like, okay, I see the black and white soccer ball, that's all good, and I need to see the green of the grass. I want to be able to see green. There's, again, no right or wrong answer. Maybe you're like, yeah, the color red, just like Jonas, so you can see beautiful red apples or red hair. What color, if you could only choose one color to see, what color would it be? And then, a little trickier, how would you describe color to someone who couldn't see it? If you were going to tell Jonas, okay, you're about to see color, what words would you use to describe color? Because remember, Jonas doesn't have any concept of that. To him, the world exists as just kind of shades of black and white and the in-between gray. So to add something like color that he has no idea, no grasp of, might be kind of tricky. So this is where precision of language, as they would say in Jonas's community, is tough because they don't have precise language to describe color. But we are totally up to the challenge, so do your best to describe to Jonas what it's like to see color. And later, in the next chapters, we're going to discover what Jonas thinks of color when he gets to see the rainbow with the giver. So take some time, and again, this should be about a paragraph long. So a paragraph to tell me about what color you would want to see and why, and then another paragraph describing what's it like to describe color to someone who doesn't know what color is. So about 5 to 7 sentences per. So we're eventually going to have 3 paragraphs, right? So you've got your first one from chapter 11 and then 2 paragraphs from chapter 12 for a total of 3 paragraphs. You've got all the way until our class on Thursday to get that done. And remember, I am here at any point to ask questions. If you don't have a copy of the book, we do have copies here at Seashore, so you're welcome to come and stop by to pick up a copy. Otherwise, this book is available at the library, definitely. So if you would like your own copy, don't read ahead. We want to kind of stay together as a class. That way our class discussions can stay on topic and we're not giving away spoilers. So if you'd like a copy, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll keep reading out loud together. And I am very excited on Thursday to hear what you guys come up with. So again, Google Classroom is going to be a great resource for you. And let me know if you have any questions. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and I will see you soon.